In the last video, we had a look at how we can create a fine and flexible felt using exclusively merino wool. And today we're going to see what happens when we add viscose fiber to our fine merino. So for our experiment to make sense, we're going to use the same 30 by 30 template. And we're also going to use 6 grams of fiber. So if you can remember, in the last video we used 6 grams of merino to create this sample. And what we're going to do today is use 6 grams of fiber again, but we're going to have 4 grams of merino plus 2 grams of viscose. Okay, so let's start the layout. So this is a 30 by 30 template, and I have my merino and my viscose, and I'm going to start doing my chevron layout. So as you know, the chevron only needs one layer. We don't have to make a second one to guarantee the whole surface is covered by wool. Okay, so the first thing we do is do a little frame, and I'm laying out really thinly. I prefer adding to the layout if in the end I have fiber left, but this way I guarantee that I have enough wool to cover my whole surface of my template. Okay, and so now I can start doing the actual chevron layout. And so it goes like this. Then you turn it around so that you always overlap this edge, which is the thicker edge, on top of the less thick edge. Okay, so again, this is the thickest end of my fiber, of my shingle, and then I turn it around so that it now lays on the thinnest end of my shingle. Okay, I finished my chevron layout, and I'm now going to apply some viscose fiber on top of my wool, and I'm just going to start by pulling my fiber to make it shorter, and I'm going to work with small amounts each time. Pull it off again, and I'm going to pull very, very, very light amounts of fiber and do what we call a cloud layout, which is completely irregular, but still the goal here is that you cover the surface evenly so that more or less the same amount of viscose lies on all the surface of your template. So again, I always start a bit thinly and then I add as I go, just to guarantee that I have enough fiber to cover the whole surface. And I pull some off again. And I just go on repeating. Try to avoid having any chunks of fiber on any area, and go on until you finish your viscose. Now I have my viscose laid out on my wool. I'm going to remove my template so that I don't get it wet. And I'm now ready to add water and soap. So this is more than enough. I'm going to add some of my liquid soap, which is just olive oil soap that I've dissolved in a bit of water. And I'm going to use the exact same felting and fulling methods I used in the last video. So gentle methods, because it's also a fine layout. So you can either opt for a plastic film and give the piece a shake on the table, or use your knitting and do some rubbing, but very, very gently. This is always my favorite felting method. You can obviously also use your sander. This would be very effective here. So when it starts felting and getting a thin skin, I'll then do some rolling to fold the piece. I'm doing the rubbing from the back, so this is the wool side, not the viscose side. I've gotten quite some shrinkage already out of my piece, but of course it needs to shrink much more than this. It's very, very fragile still and very, very fine, and I want my edges to become much straighter, and for that I like to use my bamboo mat to roll. For me, this is what gives me the best results for this type of exercise. Of course, you need to watch out for the wrinkles because it's still very, very fine. So I finished felting my sample and I shrank it as much as I did the previous one. So this too is 15 by 15 and I got a 50% shrinkage rate in both directions. As I did for this one, I also ironed it so that it would become nice and flat. And now I wanted to show you the differences between these two. So if you can remember, this sample was made with 6 grams of an extra fine merino wool. So this is a 19 micron merino. And this one was made with 4 grams of the same type of merino plus 2 grams of viscose. So they both weigh 6 grams, but we have 2 different types of fiber in this sample. And also, very important, if you can remember, this was made with a classic layout, so a horizontal and a vertical layer. And this here was made with a chevron layout. And by the way, if you want to know more about the chevron layout as well as other types of layout used in wet felting, you can download the PDF below this video. But as I was saying, I would now like to show you the differences between these two types of felts. Okay, so this is pretty flexible and soft, but now watch this one. It kind of behaves differently, doesn't it? It's even more flexible. And even softer. Can you see how it behaves differently? And this difference is due to the fact that there is viscose in this layout, whereas this one is only made with merino. The second difference between these two samples is the elasticity that they have. So you could pull a little bit, but not much happens, right? It looks like a piece of wool that has been felted. Now watch this one. Can you see the difference? It behaves nearly like a knit fabric, doesn't it? And this difference is due to the difference in the layout. This, again, was a classic layout. This is a chevron layout. If you have a look at the PDF in the link under this video, you'll see the reason why there is a difference between these two in terms of elasticity. Okay, so I hope you've learned something with this video. If you have, share this with friends who enjoy these little tips about wet felting. And I'll see you next week when we'll go through the third example of a fine and flexible felt. Okay?